All right, everybody. I think we can go ahead and get rolling. It's the top of the hour. One more presentation to go. This has been really good conference so far. Some really compelling topics. So why don't we keep this momentum rolling? We've got our next presenter is Sean Good from Jane.com. So, we began the day with Liz Castles giving us an overview of the Agile Research Toolkit. Sean's going to bring us down to earth a little bit. So, give us some insight into, okay, if we start, implementing these efficiencies, if we start, do we run the risk of agiling ourselves out of a job, and how do we avoid that? So democratizing research without jeopardizing your job is his topic. And I'm gonna get out of the way and let Sean do his thing.
All right, hopefully everyone can hear me. Good. All right, let's see. All right, let's see. I'm gonna share my screen. And hopefully you can see a deck slide. All right, good. This is always the most nerve-wracking part about any Zoom meeting, is the first part. Well, all right. Hello, I will jump right in. Thank you, Bill, for the short intro. Also, thank you to Accelerant Research for hosting these conferences. I'm pretty new to them, actually, but as I was going through some of the past conference speakers and their decks, so enlightening, so interesting and educational. I'm really honored to be a part of it. And so thank you for having me and for inviting me to chat a little bit about what I love to talk about every day, user research. Let me go ahead and dive in. As he mentioned, the topic of today is democratizing research without jeopardizing your job. A lot of this is going to be coming from personal experience, and I'll explain why. And I hope that all of you find it interesting, engaging, helpful, no matter what kind of role you're in, the size of your organization, and how things break out. So let's see. Quick introduction. As he mentioned, my name is Sean Good. I am a user experience researcher at a company called Jane.com. I've been doing this for 3 years, all with Jane, actually. I've been with Jane for 4 years. My background is actually in marketing and advertising. And so I came over from the ad agency world and ad agency life to join the tech side of business. And in that, I made a lateral move into user research. And I absolutely love it. I love what I do every day. I find it super interesting and engaging, and I love talking about it. Currently, I'm the only user researcher at Jane. We used to have a second, my former manager, but we have contracted down to just one, and that's how it's been for the past 2 years now. And my role currently pertains to product research, but I do expand my responsibilities out because I have democratized my own research. So I touch a couple other departments as well, doing usability testing, customer surveying, competitive analysis and research, and really anything else that comes across my desk that relates to the customer that we want or that we currently have. A little bit about Jane.com, just so you have a little background info. It was founded in Utah in 2011. We just celebrated our 10th Jane-iversary, as we called it. We began as a limited time deal site. So if you remember, about 2010 to 2013, these were really popular. The deal a day thing, the countdown timers. We managed to survive that, and now we are thriving with a lot more than those deals, but we still run on a limited time model. What makes us unique, we are e-commerce retail targeting women. About 98% of our customers are women. And we source our products similar to Etsy through independent sellers. We have currently about 3,000 active sellers. A lot of these are small businesses, a lot of women-owned businesses throughout the US. It's been really exciting to work for Jane and to not only see our own growth, but the growth of our sellers that we partner with. So just to dive right in, democratizing research. What is it and why is it important? So as I mentioned, I'm the only researcher at Jane.com, and I have been for a while. it's been important in my situation to democratize research because I'm only a person of one. We have about 200 people working in Jane right now, and there's a lot of questions going around. And right now, we haven't had the budget or the desire to expand research. Therefore, it's been up to me to democratize that out and get more people on board of the importance of user research and how it can benefit them outside of just product or even just user research that I do. So today, just to kind of give a baseline definition, when I say democratization of research, I'm really meaning creating an environment where those who aren't researchers feel empowered to engage in the user research process. There are a couple different things that this accomplishes for you when you manage to do it. One of them is proving value. And so proving value in user research and the process itself. I'm going to go into these in a bit more depth later on, but showing through insights and ROI that it's worth taking the time to perform research, to invest in a researcher or a team of researchers, and to prioritize it in decision-making processes. Democratization also helps expand research capabilities on a budget. When I started at Jane, we were a company of 100 people. And so there was a lot of work and not a lot of hands to do it. But by expanding that out, getting people interested and engaged and even participating, I'm able to stretch my skill set and provide more services for the company on the budget of one. And this might be valuable to you as well. As you're looking around at your organizations, you might see a need for user research, but you may see a budget lacking for scaling up the people who do that. You can step in and create these processes that help extend your reach on a budget, which is really helpful, especially in a smaller startup or small business. And then third, democratizing builds a research-minded organization. To me, this has been most important and most rewarding. But when people are involved in this process and they understand what's going on behind the scenes, they become not only interested and engaged, but they start to think like a researcher, even if that's not their primary goal. So they're making decisions based off of the same data, or they're asking similar questions. They are thinking about what questions they don't have answers to yet before they go and make decisions. And that just means that your organization starts to move as one. It's very efficient, and it takes the needs of the consumer into the highest priority. And this is something that I've seen at Jane, and I'll talk about a little later as well. But as far as democratization goes, I tried to break it down into 3 out of many different steps of what you can do. I was really going back and forth on how many different ways I've done this, or it could be done. Sorry, just checking the chat, making sure people can hear me. So I broke it down to just 3, but of course, this is going to depend on where you are as far as your role, your management, how much do they let you in and out of your guardrails, what are the needs of the company, the maturity of the company, and the research teams that they already have. But let's start with this one right here. Building bridges. I'm going to talk about how you can build bridges across your organization to start this process and then keep it going. I'm going to talk about delegating, good or bad. And like I mentioned, we don't want to jeopardize our jobs. So how can we find this balance within delegation that keeps you involved and at the forefront, while also getting other people involved and stretching that reach of your skill set. And third, I'm going to call it CYB, cover your butt. This is also a part of not jeopardizing your own roles. As you expand your responsibilities and you start to bring in others who maybe aren't as trained in research as you might be, there come with certain risks, but there are ways to mitigate those risks. So I'm going to go over a couple of those to hopefully help you sleep better at night. I was talking to a friend that a lot of this is also based on this imposter syndrome that at least I deal with daily. I don't know, maybe some of you as well, but if you know your stuff, if you can cover your butt, things work out for the best in the end. And then last thing before I get rolling, I just want to acknowledge my own biases to everyone. Like I said, I've been working at Jane for 4 years. That is my experience in user research. We've been, it's a special case. So as I'm talking, note that these are illustrated by my experiences and they may not relate to you, but I try to understand that and hopefully you will as well. And like I said, I hope this can help some of you. Let's talk about that step one, building bridges. Who is responsible for user research? This is a question that you see sometimes in early, smaller businesses, ones that are still growing or very low in the research maturity model. Who's going to do it? In some cases, it's a shared responsibility among a bunch of different people who aren't trained in research. You might see product managers being asked to do it on the side as they are creating their pitches. User UX designers a lot of times are responsible for their own prototype testing or getting images out for A/B testing and things like that. I've seen marketing teams do it. Sometimes it gets pushed to an intern. It doesn't have to be a research intern, but if they have the time, they can do it. Who has access to Google? Just, hey, let's pull it up on Google and see what these third-party research firms have found about our customer. And if you're really lucky, you get the budget to hire a dedicated UX researcher. This is rare but growing, and it's great to see that this is a developing career and skill set. Jane, in my example, was pretty early as far as creating a team of more than one, but it's really benefited us. And so we can see the benefits of it, but other companies have a little trouble with it sometimes. Like how much value can I get from this one person who's only, writing surveys or something like that? But as you probably know, there's a lot more to user research than just survey writing and things like that. And so what sometimes happens, and if you are joining a new organization, you just got hired with a new job, you may see it as the Spider-Man standoff of everyone's pointing fingers. Who's going to take care of this? Oh, he's done some and she's done some. What happens here, though, if there's no defined roles of who's going to be responsible for research, sometimes there are problems. Diffusion of responsibility is one. When especially results are presented or acted upon and they don't work out, well, they'll just start pointing fingers like so-and-so did it. But really, what was their methods? There may be inconsistency in the data collected. If you have two different teams running similar tests, but on different samples, you can get very different results and they can head in separate directions. Also, just stepping on each other's toes, duplicating efforts, maybe some people taking offense at some claims being made that don't match their data. It's a little disorganized. And so having a dedicated user researcher or becoming one yourself can help alleviate a lot of these pains, bring some organization and efficiency to an organization, and really develop better results and data from what you're collecting. Sometimes when looking at user research, just as a baseline definition here as well, it's studying your target users' behaviors to inform business decisions. Sometimes what seems like second nature to you can be really a mystery to other people. If you're in the qualitative research space or user research, you have your methods and your best practices. You know how to which levers to pull to get the results you're looking for. You know how to take all this data you collect from customers and you can synthesize them and break them down into really digestible formats. This is where you shine, and this is what you do every day. So of course you're going to be good at it. But looking from the outside, if you're looking at maybe a user researcher or a research team, it can feel kind of mysterious if there's no democratization that happens. What it can feel like is, let's say I'm on the marketing team. I submit a request or a question to a research team. Something happens in what I'm going to call the research mystery box, and then out pop these great insights. That's really cool for you if you're not involved in research or if you don't care about research. But for some people, this can cause a little bit of an issue or a disconnect. What's happening in this research box? What is the secret recipe, the magic sauce, right? And how can I trust the insights that come from this researcher. If this goes on for too long, if as a researcher, you're not letting people inside your methods, inside your mystery box, some problems can occur. They can start to distrust your methods. And actually all of these three I've seen in personal experience. Distrusting your methods being, are you sure that was an accurate test? Are you sure you had a big enough sample? You only got 50 people on this. You only got 8 usability tests. I don't feel like that's enough. And because of that, they may start to doubt your recommendations. They may say, well, because it was such a small sample size that I don't understand how you've connected the dots between the data and your findings. I just don't trust them. And so you go through all this work to source customers, create this test, run this test, synthesize the test, rewatch the videos. It goes into this beautiful deck that gets passed up to a stakeholder, and they just toss it out and they go with what they already know. In other words, they revert to their data, the anecdotes that they see on their own biased point of view, and they roll with that instead of the strong data you provided. And so democratizing research, as you start to reach out and build these connections, build bridges, what it does is it changes how people respond to the information you provide. So instead of distrusting your methods, as they become involved, as you involve them and build these bridges, they start to trust them more. And so they don't second guess your recommendations quite as often. When you provide these recommendations, because they trust the process now, they trust that the recommendations you provide are accurate and they can move on them. And then third, they can start to disregard their anecdotes and their assumptions and begin to trust the data even if they're proven wrong. And this is sometimes the biggest learning curve, is understanding that you are no longer your customer. You are representing your customer, but you do not know them best. This change is really a great benefit of democratizing and building bridges, because it really makes your job easier in the end. As a researcher, you can spend maybe less time worrying about how your results and findings will be taken, and you can trust that they will be utilized effectively and accurately. Also, it's great to see as trust is built in your research, the research you provide goes further. Things start to be shared outside of your small bubble with it, whichever department you're in, or just your own team. You start to see things becoming shared outside of that, incorporated into strategy or other department meetings. This is a sign that what you're doing is going well. The nice part when trying to start building bridges is that your customers are interesting. What I found is no matter which team you're on in an organization, even not involved in research, customers are cool, especially if you have a fun product or you have a fun customer set. Like I mentioned, Jane.com is 98% women shoppers, and they come from a very diverse background. They have a lot of things going on as they decide where to shop for products that define them. And as a result, talking to them is really enjoyable. I guess I'm sort of lucky. I've never had a bad customer interview. They are all so friendly and accommodating. And as I share that out with other teams, they see it as well. Deep down inside, no matter which team someone is on, they're always wondering, what is the customer thinking? So some of these questions: where do they live? What do they do when they're not interacting with your business? How do they think? What do they think about? Why do they identify with your brand? Why do they choose you? Why do they continue to choose you? Why do they pick you over your nearest competitor? All these are engaging questions, fun thought experiments. They relate directly to user research, but a lot of people don't think so. And so the way to build bridges is, trusting your customer base and how they think, and then sharing that out. And that really helps build maybe the first bridge, like, hey, these people are cool. We can really learn a lot from them. And here's how. So some ways to build bridges, just go through a couple steps for you. Finding allies. I find this to be super beneficial, and it can actually come naturally. As you're either starting with a company or if you've been with a company for a while, just keep an eye and take note of who's actually paying attention to the stuff you provide. Who is asking you questions? Who comes to you more often? Who's asking those deep questions that really trigger tests for you? Put a little note in your planner like, hey, reach out to this person because they already show interest in the research process, but maybe they don't know where they can take it. And this is where you can step in and guide them along, be that mentor to them as you build bridges to democratize research. You can start with them and it makes things a lot easier. Have an open door policy. This is one for me has been easy and fun. It depends on your workload as always. If you feel really tied down with responsibilities and deliverables, this can be really hard to open your door and say, if you ever have a question, just hit me up. One way that I've done this is through Slack. You create a Slack channel just for user research. That's what I've done. And it's just an open conversation. I also have a form that people can use as far as submitting their questions. It's a 3-question form. What's your name? What's your big question? And when do you need it by? And this just allows people to feel invited to participate, that this is no longer a mystery box where things happen outside of their control. They can actually have a part in it and become part of the whole process. Let's see. Marketing your skills. I joke that I feel like 50% of the time I'm marketing what I do versus the other 50% I'm doing what I do. This is once again dependent on your workload, but it does pay off in the end. This is removing the cover or the curtain behind this mystery box of what researchers do. This is going out and maybe being a little annoying even. And so what I've done, for example, is I'm pretty often sharing what capabilities I have. So, hey, by the way, we have this tool. We can access our customer demographics. If you ever have questions about people who don't shop with us, I can run this kind of test. I've done this kind of test. Don't forget, we have access to these platforms that help us run tests quicker. In the way of being annoying, even popping into people's channels that I work with, like, hey, I'm still here. Don't forget, we can do this. And even sharing results, which I'll talk about in a second. But just always making sure you get the attention you deserve. I think even more now, as you notice, I'm working from home. I don't even have the benefit of running into people in the cafeteria, the lunchroom, right? That's where I felt I used to get a lot of test requests. And so a little extra effort is sometimes required to get your name out there and remind people you're still here, even though you don't see each other every day. Go where the data is. So build bridges by actually building bridges, right? In this case, look at where data is being collected, what groups, what people are doing this, and try to integrate with them. So in my case, what we've done is I work with marketing on occasion, with our creative team, and with our data science team. These are areas where they are collecting other sorts of customer data that aren't directly qualitative, such as interviews and such, where they're collecting either site data or marketing data or click data. And I have created open lines of conversation and communication with them. What you can do here is you can be inquisitive yourself. So while we're asking others to be inquisitive of what you do, be inquisitive of what they do. Understand how you collect site data and how is it processed? How are they using data to come to decisions? And then what you can do is look at ways that your data can illustrate and color in the lines for theirs and vice versa. And so, for example, a great partnership I have is with their data science team. As I sat in on their meetings, I just listened in and listened to some of the questions they were having, and I take notes where they're kind of missing, not even missing, they just didn't have enough data to connect 2 dots that I could fill in with qualitative data. And so I'd go out and run those tests, come back, report on it, And all of a sudden, we're all in a better place. And now I trust their process and they trust mine, and we can work closer together in the future. This has helped us move forward as far as even on the qualitative side, understanding why people feel certain ways. As you know, sometimes there's a bias in user research where people aren't totally aware of the processes going on in their head. Like, why did you click on this button? Well, I don't really know. Sometimes other teams can fill this in with, let's say, click data. You can understand, oh, they went through these 3 steps. We saw that they stopped scrolling at this point and then they left the page. They wouldn't be able to recall this because it wasn't maybe quite as an impressionable an event in their mind. But by taking that and applying my data and vice versa, it's able to paint a richer picture of total experience. And this bridge can help you go a lot further because now you're also collecting way more data. Be transparent. Like I've mentioned, removing that curtain on the mystery box. Be willing to reach out and teach and mentor and give away some of your secrets, right? Explaining things in simple terms, breaking it down, making it understandable to the layperson is a good way to put it, right? There's a lot of science behind user research. It doesn't have to always be shared in its fullness. You can break it down into very simple bite-sized pieces. But also just being transparent shows that you are not hiding anything from anybody. That's a trust building step, right? And the last thing here, make it fun. Oh, sorry, share your results and make it fun. Making it fun really, I think, goes the furthest because when it's enjoyable, people are willing to participate a little bit more. Share a couple ways to make it fun. Lunch and learns are awesome. Especially, you provide the food. Who doesn't want to go to a meeting where they have free food and they can learn some cool stuff? This can be on research processes. This can be on recent findings. This could be a Q&A. Really, the sky's the limit. But not only does this get your face out in front of these people, it also gets the mystery behind what happens in research. It comes to light and it makes them feel more comfortable with that experience. Run research on your coworkers. This one's always fun too, because it's neat to see it from the other side. This can be sharing the same research tests you share with your customers with them. It can be custom making just coworker specific tests. It can be fun, it can be serious. But once they see what it's like to experience from the customer's point of view, they start to build empathy for them. And they also see how enjoyable it can be, and they want to participate themselves. Let's see. Invite them to participate in your sessions. As you are running your tests with customers, always have an open invitation, like, especially with stakeholders, hey, if you want to listen in, here's a link. This can be controlled so that they are not participating. This is kind of your choice of how much leeway you want to give, but at least allowing them to be present builds so much customer empathy, and it really gets you a lot further down the road of trusting the customer and what they say, and then trusting what you as the researcher says and recommends. This is great, especially if they have any direct responsibility with what you're testing. For example, if you're testing a prototype, get the designer to listen in. Sometimes it's nice hearing a little brutal feedback on your test, but it's also good seeing and watching how customers are interacting with what you create. And I'd hope it'd be rewarding for them as well. And then share findings in engaging ways. Like I mentioned, breaking this down for them in a really digestible way really helps. Just kind of build that bridge into what you do and why it's cool. For me, I use Slack a lot to do this. Like I mentioned, I have a dedicated Slack channel just for user research. I try to keep it a bit more of a conversation and less of a one-way kind of just me posting my results. But for an example, recently I did a quick impromptu poll as far as a question about online shopping. Just got them involved with thumbs up, thumbs down. And then I posted the results to my test that I recently ran with their customers. These synopses are broken down very simply. It's a one-page deal, a lot of charts. I quickly mention any insights and recommendations. But outside of that, if they want more details, I have it elsewhere. But for them, I try to keep it simpler and more engaging so they can browse through it while they're doing their regular job. I mean, they don't have 10 minutes to read through my stats or my number crunching, but charts are cool. And it's something that they can also grab and share, right? Which is really what I want to do. Encourage that reading and spreading. Sometimes it's one sheets, sometimes it's just graphics. But if it looks interesting, if it's illustrated, if it's broken down nice and simply, they can grab it and put it in their deck, and all of a sudden you've just got more eyes on your work. And so starting to see that spread throughout a company is really rewarding too, because it means your work is actually going somewhere and being used and trusted. Step 2 is delegate. Why delegate? It's really a balance between how much freedom you want to give and how many restrictions you need to have. A couple of pros when choosing whether or not to delegate: you can cover more ground. In a lot of cases, qualitative research teams are kind of small, but there's a lot of work to be done. Many hands make light work. So by getting more people involved, you can cover more ground a little more quickly. It also increases buy-in, and you create allies, which you can then use in the future for other things. Cons, as you probably know, you have so much to do already. I don't have time to do this. There's a lot of uptime and investment up front. It takes time to create processes that can be understood and shared with others, a little bit of training, making sure that they're doing things in a consistent way. That involves you to pull time off of what you need to do to work on them. It also reduces consistency and control in some ways. As you spread out the work, they're going to run it in their own way. They're going to have different methods than you, perhaps. This is just going to change the consistency versus you just doing everything yourself. Once again, that just depends on what you're comfortable with. And then last, like I mentioned at the very beginning, we don't want to jeopardize our jobs, and how do we not do it? If not done carefully, delegation could lead you to becoming less relevant. But at the same time, it's important to make sure you actually are providing value to the company you work for. And so that balance is something that'll be on a case-by-case basis, but I encourage you to spend time thinking about it and kind of measuring out where you want to go with it. What can be delegated? In user research, there's some low risk and some high risk kind of testing. There's also low risk and high risk tests itself. When considering what to delegate, perhaps start with low risk and move up as you build out skill sets, train more, build out these guidelines. Looking at some low risk things, writing surveys, creating polls, and just basic discovery research. These are a little bit quicker to train others to do. Can usually be low risk. They can be redone pretty quickly if something happens with a sample, or a question was written weird or formatted weirdly. That's a great place to start, and it's interesting for the coworker who's getting involved. Customer guerrilla testing. This might depend on who is your ally, who you're trying to get trained up. But if they are in a position where they can do this, it's really helpful. For example, a designer, a user experience designer, as they are working on some prototypes, they have a couple of questions about button placement, button colors. This is something they could quickly jump into with minimal training, as far as getting this in front of a few customers and getting some quick feedback to be used as they develop out their prototype. In this case, training would be things like how to ask unbiased questions, how to actually grab maybe some random sample of people on the street, not just asking your friends, things like that. Prototype testing, this one gets a little bit more complicated, at least especially with limited prototypes, making sure that it is not a confusing experience for the customer. That's what I see most often, even as I'm running prototype tests, making sure they don't get lost or pulled out of the experience that you're trying to get. Most high risk, I'd say, long form interviews and ethnographies where you're having to get in front of these customers on a face-to-face basis, or getting into their places of business or homes. That would take a bit more risk, a bit more time, a bit more training. And so maybe don't start with those unless you're really confident in the person you're trusting. Just because if something goes wrong, if the data you find isn't accurate, you'd have to redo it, which would cost time and money for you and for them. How to delegate. Some quick tips for this. Create and maintain guidelines. This is really important. At the end of the day, you are still responsible for research. And so making sure that best practices are maintained is really important. Delegation is not a free-for-all, right? So this can be writing out a roadmap. This can be explaining what is delegated and what is not, what kind of tests are allowed to be taken by other people versus not. A research guide is helpful to train those who are interested, allowing them ideas and best practices for different kinds of tests. This is kind of writing out your process. It's kind of helpful to have anyway. When to use what test. Here are some templates for surveys or for polls. Here are some programs that we have access to that you can use. Let's see. Last being check in regularly. As you're going through all this, as you create these guidelines, as you train those who are interested, make sure you don't cut off communication as you go along. Like I mentioned, this is still something that needs to be guided by you. As you go along, as you mentor and monitor them in their process, it's always okay to talk to them for feedback. It's okay to start to maybe pull back or give more responsibilities. At the end of the day, this really does depend on you. I encourage you to sit in on their sessions. I'll let them sit in on yours, cross-train on these things. Ask them how it's going. It's okay if after they've done this a few times, if they're not enjoying it, it's okay to take it back onto your plate. There's nothing worse than, I guess, participating in research in someone who doesn't want to be there, right? And so that's not ideal for them or for the customer who you're working with. And so keep that communication open and working with them. As they give feedback on things, you can update your guidelines, you can update your training manuals. It's back and forth communication, and it's really nothing is fixed and set in stone. So don't let it feel like that. This should be fluid. This should be constantly changing as you grow as a company, as your needs change. This will be slowly shifting over time, and that's okay. Also important here with check-in is logging their information. And so tracking what they do and putting in a repository. I'll talk about this in 1 minute, but all the data they collect is still valuable data, especially if they've gotten really adept at participating in their specialization. It's important that you take time to pull that all together, continue to synthesize it, and use it as part of your research as well. It shouldn't stand alone. It shouldn't be, oh, that was not run by me, so it's less valuable. That should not be the case. It should really still be an extension of you and your work, and therefore take all that data and continue to use it. And so be sure to log what they're doing as they go along. I'm skipping through this just because of time. These are all things I just covered. I should have just blanked out these slides though. Because of time, I wanted to get into the last section here, called Cover Your Butt. At the end of the day, the buck stops here, it stops with you, and you're responsible for the research that is collected. Democratization is good, but like I mentioned, there's this trade-off of pro and con of risk and responsibility. And no matter who is running this research, whoever you trust to do it, remember that it still comes back to you, that at the end of the day, you need to vouch for the work that's done. You need to take responsibility, even if it wasn't you directly in these tests. And you need to own up to any mistakes that are made. Some things that we can do to minimize this. Be very clear about the limitations of qualitative research when presenting your findings. What happens is, as people grow in their maturity with research, it's important to remember that qualitative research, as is all research, has its limitations about how far you can stretch a finding, how can it be applied, how long can it be applied for. So as you are presenting data, as you are collecting it, as you are training others, be very clear about what are these limits within the findings that they have. This is especially important with stakeholders who are very separated from the research. So think of like VPs and department heads. They might not understand the nuance of research. And so, for example, if you're taking a targeted study of your customers during the holiday season, be sure to note in your findings, this is relevant to our holiday season customers. If we want to discuss our non-holiday customers, recommend other tests. This just makes sure down the road, it doesn't come back to bite you when they say, well, you gave us this test result and it didn't work out. If they weren't aware of the limitations, that's kind of on you to make sure that they understand that that was for a limited time, a limited group, a limited sample. Be honest about timelines. Speed and depth are one of these balances that's really important. How deep do they want to go versus how quick do they need results? Be very upfront about this and have those who work with you, those who you've built bridges with or collaborated with, let them know that this needs 2 weeks to run correctly. This really does reduce frustration and anger coming your way, especially when people have these last minute things and it's your fault that it can't be done. Technically, it just can't be done in the timeline needed, but maybe there's some other alternatives that could work better for them and for you. So recommend additional testing, different types of testing. Instead of running this big test, let's run 2 small ones to get us part of the way there. This comes back as looking good on you and the research team that you work for, as far as you're responsible with your time and that you always deliver as expected. Keep your ear to the ground. This is part of just listening in and being involved in other teams and building those bridges there, but keep your ears open for how your data is interpreted and used. This comes from a personal experience with Jane. A couple years ago, we built out some customer personas, and what happened, the customer persona was, the main one was called Jenny. Her name was Jenny. She was our common customer. She illustrated her loves and needs and desires and attitudes and behaviors. But what had happened is I was listening to other meetings, I heard someone named Jen being referenced, and I'm thinking, who is Jen? Do they just mean Jenny, my persona? Is that just a shorthand? And I just logged it, but I didn't know what to do about it. I come to find out that Jen was kind of the sub persona that had been created through some word of mouth sharing of data, right? So some of the findings were very accurate and some were not. What ended up happening, I had to go through and analyze their data compared to the original data and make some corrections within it. If I hadn't been paying attention, this could have gone even further down the road until you have a totally different and maybe inaccurate representation of your customer. But because I was listening for these things, I was able to kind of nip it in the bud early, and it wasn't a big deal at all. It's just someone had talked to someone, and things just got passed around through the game of telephone. Last here for covering your butt is keeping the receipts. So this just means having things written down that support your findings and your research and your sources. So cite them and log them. Any third data you correct, any third-party data, I'm sorry, anything that's clipped and shared, make sure you're citing where it's coming from, the tests, the samples, anything relevant to that, and encourage others to link back to your original data as well. So if you create a deck with your findings and they grab a clip, encourage them to also link back to that deck in case someone finds that, they want to know when was it sampled, who is the sample size, was it significant or not. They can easily dive into your work as you originally intended, and that just prevents these problems from bubbling up where they are interpreting data incorrectly. Log your data and your findings in a public repository. This should be shared by everyone in the company, and they should be able to access it at any time. Again, this is removing that mystery box feeling, but Confluence, Airtable, a wiki page, your own page is great for this. Google Docs even. Make it just so they can always find what you've done, the data behind it, the recommendations, the source info. That transparency only helps you. It's a little bit more work to write all this stuff up and log it, but by creating it and sharing it publicly, it just really saves you a lot of time later trying to dig up what you've done. Example here on the right is just what I've done. I use a Confluence page. I log all of my tests. I categorize them. This is accessible by anyone in the company. I share out these links as I report on tests. I link back to them. At any point, someone can look and see maybe how our data has changed, how my findings have changed over time, things like holiday shopping habits. Obviously, they change year over year, but this just shows that I have nothing to hide. Everything is solid. I've gone through my data and they can trust it. So as I've talked about these things, just wanted to bring it all back. Why is it important? What has it done for Jane.com? Why is it important to consider doing it for yourself? So just a quick loop back, creating an environment where those who aren't researchers feel empowered to engage in the process. It proves the value of research, it expands your capabilities on a budget, and it helps you build a research-minded organization. So this is why it's important to do it. Let me talk about just how we've managed to do it in Jane and why I believe in this process. As I've democratized research here, it's led to the idea that we test assumptions first, but it leads to better decisions later. This is important because less mistakes happen. We kind of win more often, so less of these expensive failures. It's really a small investment. So running a user test doesn't have to be a lot of time or money involved, but it can really prevent big problems. And we've seen that happen where it stops you very early in the process before you get too far down the road of a new feature, a new strategic move. A little test first can save a lot of pain later. We filled in knowledge gaps. When I first began, there's a lot of questions about who's the Jane customer, why do they shop with us, what are they doing outside of their Jane experience. As user testing has gone along, as people get more involved in it, we filled in gaps outside of my own department even. We now know how they interact with marketing, how they view our creative and what's important to them there, how they view the features on our app and website. And as time goes on, as all these tests continue to happen, and not only are we filling in all these former gaps in what we didn't know, but it's also sparking new questions, and especially questions that I wouldn't have thought about myself. That's the best part of democratizing research, is it gives new points of view to the customer and their experience outside of my own realm of experience personally. And then third, we found that it's applicable to the whole organization. And this has just been the growth of my personal responsibilities at Jane, but now that I help other teams as well, we find that user research and the skills and processes and types of tests involved there can be applied and utilized by other people as well. So I've become a shared resource, and the research findings that I deliver are used in other spots. So our strategic growth and our strategic plans, our marketing, our creative decisions, our photography, how we lay out and define and describe our products. These all have little bits of user research involved in it that wouldn't have happened if these bridges hadn't been built. And number two, expanding on a budget, doing more with less. That's always a great thing. It's also, we can do more faster. And so with more people involved and participating, we can iterate quicker, we can change faster. And like I mentioned, reducing these costly time expensive mistakes of going down the wrong road. But also, democratizing research has led to this setting the stage for future growth within user research itself, or it's like a proof of concept that it works. So you can start with one person, that may be you, it may be someone you're looking to hire, but by seeing this work, seeing the effects of shared user research partnerships within these different departments, and even those as you delegate collaborating with you, it shows that this is a worthy investment. It's worth having a dedicated research team or a person. It's worth including this in the process no matter what. And with Jane, user research, thankfully, is very ingrained in the process of what we do. It took time to get there, but that trust is there now. And it's not a fight that has to be won every new project, right? And now we're starting to plan for growth within my department finally, to be able to move even quicker with user research. We've already shown what can be done with one person. Guess what? If we had two, it could be done twice as fast. And so that's always nice to show to your stakeholders or your leaders. And last, building a research-minded organization. This has been the most rewarding part of doing this within Jane, reaching out, building bridges, collaborating, and things like that, is that we have changed the way that we think. People are much more curious, I feel, than when I started. The questions I get are so unique and so interesting. They are just thinking like researchers, which is really a great goal to have. They're starting to think, why does this happen? Instead of just seeing it's happening, why? They want to get involved. They volunteer to participate. They come to me with these great questions. I'll show you a couple examples in a second. They want to run data, they make decisions. So this is turning off these assumptions that they might have, and they're saying, well, let's test it first. And that is just a great thing to see from my point of view. A, it means I'm going to be relevant for a long time, but B, it also is just the mindset you want to have within a company is, well, let's step outside what we know, what we think we know, and let's just ask the customer. Let's ask the user themselves, and then we'll make a decision. It also means that they are okay and they have become okay with being proven wrong. Sometimes negating assumptions can feel challenging for you. It can feel kind of scary, but over time, as you let the data speak for itself, as you let the customer speak for itself, it gets easier for people to be proven wrong, and they actually may even prefer it. They may say like, hey, prove me wrong, but this is what I'm thinking about our customer. Am I right or not? Or not? And then last is watching research that I do affect change across the whole company. At the end of the day, I want to be doing something that has some kind of effect on the greater business and the world as a whole. And so as I have stretched out my arms to bring other people into seeing how cool research is and how they can get involved, it's great seeing down the road changes happen based on recommendations and information I've provided. And I feel that'd be rewarding for a lot of people, for you, I hope, as well. Seeing that what you're doing actually matters, it's being listened to, it's being taken into consideration, and they're doing something. And even better is when you your recommendation proves right. Obviously, that feels really good, but it's nice to see that happening over time. It builds that ownership and pride in your own work and in your department, your team. It's great seeing other people feel that as well, kind of, especially if you've mentored them, seeing them feel that same success and pride in their work. It's a self-fulfilling kind of thing. Just real quick, couple quotes. These have been just Slack messages I've gotten from people not involved with research in our company. As like I mentioned, as I've gone along, I've tried to open up the door to what I do. Anyone can reach me at any time. These questions are what I live for. These are some things I would never think about myself, but also just the excitement that you can sense that they have. Wouldn't it be cool if we knew this? It's like, it would be cool. You're getting it. This is great. Thank you. This is why I do research. Or this quote at the bottom, this is an assumption that this person could have run with, but they decided to reach out to me first. I ran a couple quick little research finding tests, found that, yes, this is one of these hobbies that our customer does enjoy. go for what you were thinking. In this case, it was going to be looking for new sellers in the sewing and homemaking space. So something that could have maybe been costly was now the risk has been reduced. And so seeing this is really just what makes my day. It makes me feel like I'm doing something good. And it shows that the work that has gone into democratizing research has actually paid off, because now I'm getting these Slack messages or emails or questions from people who have maybe never done research on their own or have never thought about it this way. And now they are feeling involved and like their thoughts and questions are important, which is exactly what I want them to feel. And so with that, any questions? I don't know how this would work. Maybe in the chat. Bill?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we do have a few questions piled up. So we've got a few more minutes. We'll try to bang through as many of them as possible. Let's see. Number one from Heidi, former Virtual Insights Conference presenter, Heidi. Thank you very much. In my organization, we use qualitative research, then quantify afterwards, and quickly forget the richness of qual. Do you have any lessons learned about giving qual an important voice equal to, or at least different than qual?
Yeah, great question, Heidi. Thank you. For me, this has been accomplished through working closely with our quantitative data team. In my case, it's very similar, where qual is used to kind of discover these problems, quant is used to illustrate them and how they're happening. At the end of the day, though, for me, it's a bit of storytelling as far as when you're working with quant data or a quant team. Like you said, the richness of qual is a story, and it's not always seen within the data, the clicks, the logged actions on a site. And so making sure you're part of those conversations, being in those meetings where you can pitch in with additional information is really helpful to kind of elevating qual to be on a similar level to quant. And so as they are reporting back on findings or results of a test, like, hey, this really matches something I heard from this customer. Having a quote ready is something I do, or I'll share out a video later. Even things like that kind of gives a face to a lot of numbers, zeros and ones that go on behind the scenes. And at least in our case, I feel like the data team does appreciate it. And I just appreciate being invited. So hopefully that works.
Yeah. Move right along. Okay, we have Rachel and John on YouTube submitting comments, and just an aside, that looks like Rachel and John are in a heated battle for the gold medal for best Q&A submitters for the day. I'm obviously watching too much Olympics. I'm making everything a competition. Both have given us compelling topics throughout all presentations. Let's go with Rachel first. How do you educate designers and stakeholders how to determine when to bring in researchers or investigate research themselves?
Yeah, so in that case, I guess two parts. How to bring in research. I always invite them just to ask before they go. It doesn't hurt to ask me a question, and then we can decide if something's necessary or not. The second half of that, was the question to get them involved? Is that what it was? Yeah, it kind of depends on their experience and their desire to get involved. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, sometimes research was a shared resource. If you're a designer, you're kind of expected to do it yourself even. So they might have some experience and some resources to do that, but also they may just have an interest, or maybe they don't. They might have an interest in participating in a certain kind. If they have a tough skin, they might really want to be able to run an effective test on their design, which really is a great shortcut for finding insights, because they're the person I'd report to anyway. So if I can train them in to running an unbiased prototype test where they can step away and maybe not be offended by any of the criticisms they get, that's a really short line between the feedback and getting that updated and fixed. And so a little bit of both, as far as what do they have experience and what do they even have interest in. And in some cases they don't, which is okay too.
All right. Like a talk radio guy. 30 seconds or less. We've got one from John. Do Do you have any recommendations on if it's better to start democratizing with proactive or reactive research?
I'd say proactive, because then you get to set the rules. If you can get there early, you can create it in your way, which I think will save you time in the back end having to fix things that maybe aren't done to your standards. That's my short answer.
Perfect. Yeah, and we are out of time. Sean, thank you so much. This was really, really great. Really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody who was able to attend today. Be on the lookout for info on our next sessions. Everybody have a good day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Bill.
Bye.